Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone once again, and thank you for joining from wherever you are. We are happy you made time to spend some time with us to go through our discussion series. So this is our ESG discussion series by UKGCC in collaboration with KPMG. We normally have these sessions. This is the fourth one for this year, where we are going to share knowledge on topical issues in ESG. Today, we want to do ESG data quality management from strategy to integration and performance reporting. In a bit, I'll take us through why we are here. I'll give you some things to expect, and then thank you. Make time with us, minimize your distractions as much as you can, contribute when you want to. Our last session, we had a very lively people asking questions too. I already see that someone has asked the question before we start. I'm happy to welcome that. It only shows that we're going to have a very vibrant session today, and thank you for joining. We go through what we have for today. We're going to recap our last webinars. We are going to go through some questions. I'll introduce my speakers for today, or panelists for today. I've gone all the way, traveled to Nigeria to get some two people to join me do today's session. I'll introduce them in a bit, and I can't wait to learn from the plethora of knowledge they have to share with all of us. So we'll recap, as I said, we'll go through the recap shortly. We'll have a session where we want to know you two who's joining. We will project some things we hope you speak to that. We want that detail so we know who's here with us and who's also going to contribute to our discussions. What's going to happen is you can use the Q&A chat box. You can ask your questions there. They'll be responded to, they'll be read with time. I will manage that, I'll moderate that. There are times where we'll halt the conversation, we'll welcome questions, and then at the end, we'll take some. At some point, too, depending on how you're doing with time, we'll open up for some reflections as well and contributions. As again, it's a roundtable discussion where we also want to hear from you. So when you want to speak, or if I give you the chance to speak, we will then give you the opportunity to unmute you and then ask you to contribute to the conversation. We're happy to hear where you are connecting in from, what some of your expectations are, and then questions as we move on, as data is critical in today's ESG conversation. So that's it with what we hear. We'll come back, the speakers will come at the end to give us their closing reflection on the things, and then we'll have that. So at this point, I will introduce our speakers, and I'm happy to have, we deliberately put the lady first, as we want to shine some light. One feedback I received was, they asked me that why am I a moderator and I'm always only bringing guys or gentlemen to have the conversation. So right from production and then pre-time here, there's been so much joy to have Yewande. So Yewande, thank you for being with us today. It's a pleasure to have you. Yewande has over 12 years experience supporting organizations to strengthen their processes, functions for effective ESG and sustainability integration. She works a lot with boards and senior management, has extensive collaboration with them, helping them co-create their sustainability visions and drive organization-wide transformation. She possesses deep technical expertise across sustainability transformation and integration, does governance, reporting, and measurement, and does work in DEI, has some extensive knowledge in circular economy, as well as ethical and responsible supply chain. She's led multiple investor-driven sustainability assessment and due diligence, and then she's aligned them with IFC performance standards, Equator Principle, IFRS S1, S2, and standards, as we all know. She's experienced in conducting independent limited assurance of ESG sustainability reports using ISO 14001, ISO 45001, and other standards. She has facilitated numerous capacity building workshops, so we are happy to learn from her experience from that for board, C-suite executives, and senior leadership teams across diverse industries. She is a thought leader and a speaker on several platforms, including, just to limit and to mention a few, ICANN, United Nations Foundation Social Good Program, ProPac West Africa Conference, 3i Africa Summit, and other industry and policy forums. So virtually, I want you to help me welcome Yewande. Thank you for being here with us today. Maybe you smile to us, say hello to us, and I'll introduce our next speaker.
Thanks for having me, Bernard, and good afternoon, everyone.
So my next speaker is Kehinde Fadare. I've worked closely with him, done some engagement with him, and it's my pleasure to welcome him to also share his insights on this. He has more than a decade's experience in delivering sustainability solutions across industries, specifically oil and gas, FMCG, manufacturing, and financial services, and as well, thought leader in the public sector. He's worked closely with organizations to design and implement their sustainability strategies, frameworks, and policies, and has helped to embed ESG across core operations and enhance long-term performance. He provides expertise in sustainability performance tracking, ESG assurance engagement, implementation of IFRS S1 and S2, social impact assessments, M&E for development projects, and plastic circularity initiatives. He supported state and national governments on high-impact sustainability projects. He's well-versed in leading global and local sustainability standards. He is part of the KPMG team that developed our innovative sustainability data management tool. We are happy for you to share that experience. And he's a thought leader and a recognized speaker on a plethora of platforms, noticeable among them ICANN, ProPac West Africa, Acontech Summit, and other industry and policy forums. We're happy to have you, Kehinde. I call him Kenny. So if I say Kenny, he's the same person I'm referring to. Thank you for joining us in today's discussion.
Great. Thank you, Bernard. Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you. So we are happy to have them. We have a collection of 3 decades plus on the call to discuss today's topic. We will go into that soon. And at this point, we want you to take out your phone, scan the QR code. We want to hear from you. There are questions on there. So they want to learn about who's joining the call. We want to learn about what your expectations are. We want to learn about some experience you want to share with us. And we'd love to hear from you. Again, for those who are now joining, we have the Q&A chat box where it's open to you to talk to us, ask questions, contribute. And you can even say you want a particular speaker to comment on something you want, and then I'll direct you to them. So at this point, please scan the QR code, and then we'll read the results from that. So we have questions like, which industry does your organization operate in? We want to know the industry you are. We want to ask and then soon enough, we'll ask what your current role in your organization is. We are seeing people from education. We are seeing financial industry. We are seeing mining. We are seeing people across the energy sector. We are seeing a lot. We are seeing mining. Mining is leading the charts now. We're seeing mining. We're seeing higher education. We are seeing steel manufacturing industry as well. Thank you for joining us. We'll take a little on the industry and then we'll move. We see someone too from banking and finance. There are more. We have different industries. We have from banking and finance to manufacturing to education sector. We have the mining as well. All right, maybe we'll take the last one. And we have someone from insurance. Thank you for joining. The next thing we'll look at is we want to see what your current role in your organization is. That's the next one. We want to know your current role in your organization. And looking at the charts, it's interesting. We are synthesizing the data. We are making use of the data we are collecting. And we have finance officers, risk officers. We have people in sustainability. We have EHSS managers. We are happy to have you here. We have risk management managers. We are seeing a lot of people from risk. We are seeing people that are driving sustainability. I've seen an internal auditor as well. Interesting. I've seen environment manager. And I've seen a student who is joined. I've seen a PhD student. I've seen some people in industry. So we are having a mix of people joining us. In a minute, we'll check our last question for the responses, which will be, what are your expectations for today's session? Or what do you want demystified? What do you want? What question do you have? What do you want to ask? And yes, so that's live now. We are looking at that as well. So someone is saying they want to learn about the new trends in the ESG space. They want to understand protocols around reporting. Some want to understand what it means to even gather data and what data is right for reporting. Those are some of the questions we are seeing. I'm seeing how do I even know that this data is sufficient for when a consultant comes? Someone is saying that do I have to gather all ESG data? Since ESG is supposed to be in everything we do I need to gather all ESG data? Do I need to report on everything? Questions that are coming. There are others on how do we, someone's question is, I think it's a little voluminous. I'll break it down and then understand and then read that. So the question is on, since ESG is in everything, or it's across the different functions, how do I make sure someone from another function is giving me the right data for me to collate and then report on? So they're asking question on integration. Someone is saying that how do I build a database for KPI tracking and reporting? How do I implement these ESG metrics before I even gather data on them? Someone is saying that he wants to get some exposure on some things in ESG. Thing wasn't clear. So basically there are questions around what data to gather, how to gather the data, how do I know my data is sufficient, how do I build a whole database for even KPI tracking, and then how to implement some metrics. I'm sure as the conversation evolves, we'll have more questions on that. So thank you very much to our lovely audience. We are appreciative of the fact that you took time to speak through the questions. We will go, as I said, we'll take the recap now. The recap of our last webinar. We've had three different sessions, and I'll describe the flow and then how we are here. So we had, for the beginning, we looked at making ESG reporting work. We looked at turning metrics into meaning. And on that, we debunked some ESG myths. We aligned them with the need to correct misconceptions. We clarified the difference between sustainability and ESG and aligning with need for measurable, actionable business practices. We highlighted ISSB's role in standard setting. We defined what makes a quality ESG report. We addressed greenwashing and some reporting pitfalls. I'm happy the topic of greenwashing is here. We spoke about that because there was heavy conversation on how misrepresentation of data will lead to greenwashing and then not even tracking the data rightly and then the implications thereafter. Shortly after that, we had our second webinar, and then we had global ESG regulations and their impact on Ghanaian businesses. So what these global regulations are, how they're impacting businesses across the West African corridor. We looked at the rising investor and regulatory expectations. We went through that. We looked at the risk of non-alignment. We looked at how that impacts financing, trade access, reputation. And we looked at opportunities for proactive adopters. So we went through a flow, looking at how we turn metrics into meaning and looking at what is actually shaping our businesses today. Then we decided to move out of that and do embedding ESG into corporate strategy, saying that once you take the journey and you're an early adopter, it's better than being a reactive one. So there we spoke about how ESG is no longer an option, it's strategic. One of the quotes that stayed with me was, ESG and sustainability is not about reducing the wrong, but it's about doing more good to society. It puts us in a stewardship position to help and impact lives and then people we work with. We looked at the pathways, how to embed ESG in strategy. There we considered through the business model and through the operating model, the business model across your customer, your stakeholder, and your delivery channels. We also looked at how through the operational model that is integrated, we looked at your governance, your culture, your tools, and then KPIs. And we looked at how we did a balance of how the opportunities lie therein, how they outweigh risk if businesses act early, if they take the proactive step to be on that journey. That's what we've done over our last three sessions. Now we're moving into another area where we want to talk about how to measure, track, report ESG performance credibly. So we're looking at ESG data quality management. So now we've spoken about strategy. We want to see how you can move from strategy to integration and performance reporting. So we have this conversation here. We're going to talk about data quality. There's a lot of conversation on data. If you even do a simple Google search, data and then sustainability reporting, there are a lot of pop-ups that you have. we've considered that. We've considered feedback also from our past, and we also harness our experience into this. We're going to go through mind-boggling questions, what people frequently ask questions through this webinar. That's the twist with this. There'll be questions on areas. We'll listen to our speakers, then we'll come back and take them. So I've fragmented them over certain areas that we'll speak through. As we go on, I'll be engaging with you in the Q&A, where I have to stop the speaker. I'll ask one speaker to speak to something. I'll do so. So once again, welcome, and then thank you for being here with us. So now we're going to start shortly. We are going to go into our questions. And I want to set the tone. And it's only good, all right, to ask you one day to start for us. So before we go into data governance, I want to ask, why is it important for organizations to start thinking about their ESG data at the strategy setting stage? So we want to set the tone on that. So why should we start thinking about ESG data when we are setting out on our strategy? So this to you, one day. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Bernard, for that question. I would say that ESG data discussion is an area that is very close to my heart, and close to my heart because this is an area where I feel the pain the most when I'm doing the work, because you can only do as much as the data you have as a consultant. So you want to be able to generate so many insights, you want to be able to do so many things with data, but data is not available. That's always a major issue, that we encounter. And why does this happen? This happens because more often than not, ESG factors are taken as compliance or reporting issue. So we think that is something we should start thinking about when it's time for reporting. Whereas right from when we're drafting our strategy, we should have been thinking about ESG data. What ESG data does to you when you consider it even from strategy stage is that it becomes part of your core strategy. It's not separate from your strategy. It's not something that you start chasing after you have set the strategy, rolling already. So for instance, you have the mind of leading an ESG topic in your industries. Let's say gender equality, for instance. Before you can decide that you want to lead gender equality and set the strategy to lead gender equality, it means that you have the right data as to what the status is currently within your organization when it comes to gender equality. It means that you have the data among your peers of what, where they are on gender equality. So that way you are very informed, and you are then able to set a right target to say that by the time I get to this distribution, say 40% female to 60% male, for instance, at that level, I'm going to be above my face. So you can see how data has informed your strategy at that. But if you just set 30% and you don't know if somebody somewhere is already achieved 50%, how are you able to lead your peers, as you have said in your strategy? Also, when it comes to managing risk, managing risk means that we needed to have identified our risk. That is data. You have enough data to understand what are the risks your organization is exposed to when it comes to ESG. You have the data to understand which ones you want to classify as high, medium, and low risk, because you have data to know what the likelihood of occurrence of that risk is, and the severity when it eventually occurs, to what extent is the organization going to suffer loss. So because you have all of this, you are then able to decide an approach. You're able to decide a strategy to manage that risk. Also, when it comes to having investor confidence, so you're making a presentation to a potential investor or an already existing investor, and you are making projections, you are making forecasts, you are saying you want to have achieved this, and they're trying to understand what data informed all of this projection, what data informed this strategy that you have beautifully crafted and presented. If they can't see that depth, then it reduces the credibility of the strategy that you are trying to project. So for instance, you have told your investor is very big on emissions, and you have told your investor that you want to reduce your emissions by 50%, say 2030. And your investor is asking you, where are you coming from? What's your baseline emission? You don't know where you are at the moment. You don't know what you are contributing to when it comes to emission, or you want to reduce by 50%. So all of those reasons are, why you need to have ESG data management at the back of your mind, by the time you are going into strategy. Also, in terms of developing new products, developing new markets, because you have that data, because you are informed, it helps you to design your products well. It helps you to understand your target market. If you don't have data about a market, then you have no business going there. So having all of this information helps you to set the right strategy before you then start thinking about, compliance and reporting at the end of the day. I'll just stop there.
Thank you. Thank you, Wande. I see that you're passionate about data and how it should be clear in when we set our strategy. I'm happy you remarked that we shouldn't set the ESG strategy separate from our corporate strategy. We shouldn't treat things in silos. And the data is necessary to add credibility to what we do, to help us to understand where we are going, and then to also be better facing when we are meeting our investors for conversations. And the last one you mentioned is on opportunity, how data-driven mindedness helps us to even gather information from our markets and then drive more value with them. Thank you. And as we are still setting the tone, I also want to hear from Kenny. So Kenny, your experience, right? What is the biggest barrier preventing organizations from producing reliable ESG data? So in your experience, what you witnessed, what's been a barrier, the biggest barrier preventing them from giving us that data?
Great. Thank you. Thank you for the question, Bernard. I would split the response into three because these represent some of the major categorization of issues I've seen in the past few years when it comes to data management. In fact, I would call them the PTP. So that's the people-related challenges, technology-related challenges, and process-related challenges. Over time, I've seen that one of the people-related challenges, for example, issues with the culture in itself, the culture of data management, the culture of sustainability practices, the culture of determining which KPI to track or prioritize, sometimes poses a major challenge to delivering good ESG data. Still under the people-related challenges, we have the skills and competence gap. In some instances, responsible process or data owners struggle with the right approaches or methodological standards to use in analyzing, evaluating, or even documenting relevant ESG data, especially knowing that there are globally prescribed approaches to guiding some of those data points. There's also the challenge of insufficient human resources. And I would say these are examples, one of the people-related challenges. There's a technology-related challenge in itself. Organizations sometimes struggle with investing in the right tools or investing in quality data sources that would help ensure reliability of the data sets being churned out for sustainability. And then there's a process challenge, things around weak controls and accountability, absence of a strong data governance structure, sometimes poorly defined sustainability data management processes, and a number of others are things I've seen in this instance. So to answer that question very precisely, I would say from my experience, these issues are into three: people-related issues, technology-related issues, and process-related issues. Thank you.
All right. One of the things I know about KPMG, we like a lot of abbreviations. So I think the new one I'm adding to my dictionary is PTP. So data challenges. What are biggest barriers? I hear you mention people. Either we don't have the people or we don't have the people with the right skills. And we are thankful to UKGCC for helping us build capacity with these forums. So we're happy about that. We have technology challenges. If you didn't mention technology, I'd be surprised since the tool that was developed, you are a big contributor to that. and then process-related challenge. I'm sure as we continue the conversation, we will speak more on that. So thank you. The next I'll take you to is the next session I want to look at is, we've moved from how global is affecting our businesses here. And the very last one, we spoke on how strategy is important, how early adopters and those who look at it holistically from the onset, how it helps companies adopt and then make the first benefit from this. So this session, we're going to look at strategy into integration, the whole flow, strategy integration, and then reporting flow, and then how data influences this. So back to you, Iwande. How does poor data quality affect the success of ESG strategy integration? How does poor data affect that? Poor data quality, how does it affect the strategy integration for ESG? Thank you.
Okay. So I think I'll break that question into two. And the first being, who are the users of the information? And then how will poor data impact these users of the information, right? So if we look at the broad spectrum of the users of information, if we look at the ISSB standards, the ISSB standard focuses on the providers of funds, the investors, the creditors, all of those people that make funds available for use within the business. And then beyond the ISSB standards, there are other stakeholders. We have the management, we have the board of directors, we have subcontractors. You would imagine that subcontractors, you are the ones paying them, but in all honesty, they need data from you. You're looking at employee, you're looking at community, you're looking at financial institutions, you're looking at, all regulators, importantly. So what do they use this data for? When you consider what they use the data for, you're able to understand the implication of availing poor data, poor ESG data to the stakeholders. So if you take investors, for instance, the information you provide, your ESG performance helps them to understand your risk exposures and the opportunities you are able to harness, how you plan to harness it, right? And what will be the likely benefits from investor's perspective. And then they are leveraging all of this to decide if they are going to avail their financial resources to you, right? They are using it to decide to what extent they are going to avail their resources to you. If you look at even insurers, for instance, sometimes they decide that they are not going to insure some businesses, especially when it aligns with their, we call this their blacklist, we call it a list, right? So sometimes they decide to what extent they are going to cover you. If they feel you are high risk, but they still want to do business with you, they will cover you to a certain extent and, they leave the rest to you. So imagine that they have the wrong data to make this decision, and then eventually the risk materializes. The organization is going to be liable for providing wrong information that influenced wrong decision. There are some employees that they want to even understand your culture from the start, and then at interviews, you are the one interviewed, but they are interviewing you back and asking you about your culture, asking you about your diversity. And then imagine that the information that is provided to them at that point is wrong. And then they make the decision, for instance, to join the organization, getting that they see that that is not exactly the situation. Ultimately, poor data results in wrong decisions. Leadership are not able to set goals that reflect reality because what has been presented to them is not reality. It's been either underestimated or overestimated, and then they make decisions in line with that. Also, it can result in non-compliance at the end of the day because by the time the regulator gets to know that this information has been misrepresented, it can result in fines, can result in reputational damage. We've seen issues of greenwashing, all over the internet, and it's coming, closer to us. And these are areas that we need to start looking at. Even rating agencies publish, their results, their ratings as a result of information that organizations that have subscribed to the agencies provide to them. So imagine that their rating is wrong because the organization has given them wrong information as well. This can put these organizations in very bad light. Also, in terms of resource allocation, if the risk is minimal, I'm likely to allocate minimal resources to that area of ESG, because I know that things are under control. And if you show me a very huge opportunity in an area of ESG, I'm likely to pump a lot of resources into it because I know that there is a lot in it for me. So then imagine that the information that was used to make that projection of what I think is in need for me, is not correct. It results in so many things. Results in negative publicity, fines, backlash, withdrawals of funds, all of those things that you can imagine. And at the end of the day, the organization is probably further behind than where they even were before the poor data was provided to the stakeholder.
All right, thank you, Yuande, for that. We need to look at the implications of wrong data and how they affect us. Definitely making senior management, board decisions, making wrong decisions, non-compliance issues leading to reputation and regulatory challenges, and then resource allocation problem. Nobody wants to put money in a sinking fund. That's what it is. I mean, people, I think I read one time that they didn't conduct their ENS risk due diligence well. And then the money that flowed into the company was used to sort out a regulatory problem months after the inflow had gone in. So there's no opportunity for growth on that. So that's it on the end. I'll welcome Kenny's thoughts too on what are some early signals that an organization's ESG data is weak or not fit for reporting purposes. So Kenny, please take that one. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you, Bernard. That question was right on time, because I saw one of the questions on the chat box around a proper checklist and digitization for data workflow, and I think I would pick the initial response from that. An early signal is the absence in itself of a universal data universe for the organization. An organization that has not identified what its sustainability strategy is, identify the universe of sustainability data to track, and done a compilation of such data points poses a major risk to the quality of sustainability data being churned out by the organization. So I would say that's one of the earliest signals. In fact, when we engage organizations, we are keen to mention that to be able to succeed in tracking sustainability data, it's important for an organization to start off by defining a sustainability strategy that has that universe of information. The other thing to note, then I will distill this into some of the indicators of weak data points. The other thing to note is inconsistent data. In instances where you observe variability in data quality or definitions across departments or regions, that poses a major challenge. So if company A has a subsidiary that tracks a particular data point in a format, another company tracks it in another format, or a company tracks it in a format in a location, and another location is different, it shows that the organization's ESG data structure in itself is weak. There's also debate on the clear standards, the standardized framework of methodologies for data collection, analysis, and interpretation. In instances where some of these do not exist, it poses a sort of challenge to the quality of data sets being reported by the organization in terms of ESG. A critical one I've seen over time has also been fragmented system, which is siloed data systems, especially when it comes to consolidating or analyzing ESG data points across organization. So when it comes to ensuring that there's a central base for different data points, if that is not available, it also poses a challenge to sustainability data. I dare say as well that manual data collection, perhaps over reliance on spreadsheets or manual processes, they pose a risk of material misstatements and errors. So it's also an indication that the organization's ESG data foundation is weak in itself. Ultimately, all of these costs one output. An output which is clear and glaring data gaps. It could be with scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, or social or governance indicators. When these fundamental elements of data quality are missing. It could be the strategy, the checklist, the methodology, the inconsistency of the data points, the manual process of data collection. They ultimately lead to poor data points, which has a plethora of issues. Like Yewanda has mentioned, it could impact eventual rating, investor confidence, and a number of other issues. So these are some of the ways to know that the organization's ESG data foundation is weak or perhaps not fit for reporting. Over, Bernard.
All right. Thank you, Kenny, for mentioning that. One of the things that I see prevalent is the manual with moving away and doing manual tracking and all that, and how that can be a signal that this would need some changes as we go along that. I'll move to the next section where I have on data challenges. I'm sure a lot more people want to hear on how we've seen this happen and what they can do. So across West Africa and then the wider sub-region, what common data challenges do you see, especially in organizations just beginning their journey? So on early adoption for ESG, what are some of the common data challenges we see? I believe Kenny mentioned some or one of them, and I'll leave this to you one day. Please walk us through. So Nigeria, maybe give us a Ghana flair. We are, except Jollof, we are siblings. So then you go on that.
Don't worry, we won't continue that war here.
No problem.
Okay. So I would say that yes, when it comes to ESG data management, yes, it's obvious that organizations, want to do the right thing. They want to go about it the right manner, and they want to have very high data quality, right? But yes, there are a number of challenges that organizations do face, that stand between them and having that right quality. And of course, these are things that they need to look into. And a lot of times, they are not always as difficult as they seem, and simple solutions sometimes often solve some of these challenges. Number one, I would say a whole lot of sustainability frameworks and standards. You would agree with me there are a whole lot of them. Sometimes you see some reports, and then they list that they have reported in line with these standards, and you see a whole list, and you're wondering how. But rightfully, by the time you then read those reports further, you understand their obligations to some of those reporting frameworks and standard body setting. So, for instance, in Nigeria and Ghana now, we have adopted the ISSB standards. So people are beginning to look at that. They're beginning to look at how they can align their reporting in line with it. And the ones that have not so much started the ESG journey, they are looking at how to implement, integrate within their strategy and then towards reporting, right? Before now, we've had the GRI, which has been considered as the most used, most applied reporting framework. The GRI standards are there as well. Organizations report in line with those standards, and even new standards then still refer to them. So they have that. They also have some other standards by virtue of being listed. Some exchanges have their own standards. Some people belong to some alliances. For instance, the Net Zero Alliance, the UNGC. They belong to some bodies that have their own requirements and they have to meet with. Some have funds from some bodies like the IFC, the different funding bodies, and then there are requirements from those bodies as well. They want to report in line with those bodies. Some have reporting agencies that they've subscribed to. They still want to report in line with those written agencies. Some even have global parents requirements. Their global ultimate parents have requirements of them. So there are all of those needs here, and they are trying to harmonize, trying to synchronize, to see that one report meets different kinds of requirements. So this sometimes can be a challenge, and in the course of trying to do that, if one is not careful, it can impact the quality of reports being churned out or the data being provided at the end of the day. And then you have all of this need when you then add immature reporting system to it, it then becomes a lot again. So if an organization is just starting their reporting journey, oftentimes it could be recommended that they start with a few number first, even if they have reporting obligation. Pick the ones that are core, and then the ones that are, more from ambition perspective, they can start onboarding them as they mature in this journey. So they have a lot of spreadsheets everywhere that they are trying to use. Some data come in terms of so for instance, some organizations, they don't have their meter reading directly. They get emails of pictures that they have to look into and start transcribing the figures, start imputing it into the spreadsheet they have before, somebody sending PDF somewhere. Perhaps you even have a supplier that records data in another unit different from your own. As an organization, you are then looking at how to bring it in the same unit so that you are reporting factor. All of those factors are actually quite challenging, and organizations need to devise ways to manage that. Also, in terms of getting ready for assurance as well, this can be a challenge as well. Sometimes you see organizations, they've been reporting, they feel comfortable. When it then comes to assurance readiness, or even the assurance itself, okay, that's when they then understand that, there are gaps that we needed to appeal. So I have a lot of disclosures. I have done this 30 things, but I have not kept the information in a way that it can be verified. So for instance, I say if I take charitable gift and donation, for instance, and I say that I donated this amount of money to this school, and the auditor comes, the assurance provider comes, I'm not able to provide evidence. And then the assurer is not able to give comfort over it because they don't have that evidence. Okay, sometimes you then say you have picture, then I'm thinking, okay, how do I know when this picture was taken? Is it for this year, or was the picture taken last year? You are probably thinking of validity of that information. Perhaps it's even a 2024 information. All of those things are some challenges that organizations do face. Supply chain visibility as well. Supply chain is a big one. Sometimes you have data under control within your organization to a large extent, but then because you still rely on your supply chain for some information, that then becomes a challenge to have a complete pack of data. For instance, scope 3 data for emissions. Scope 3 data is supply chain dependent, and you are as accurate as the providers of those information. So it means that if the information they provided is not accurate, you are also liable to that risk. And then you are also then thinking of how do you obtain assurance over that. You're probably thinking of getting a third party to also then assure the information from that third party again. That could be a challenge. Also, data protection and privacy matters is another challenge that process or data owners, when it comes to sustainability data, or they face. So for instance, there are some people related metrics that are quite sensitive, and there is an extent to which you can collect data. So for instance, you have One Health initiative, that maybe related to breast cancer initiative and all of that. And there's limit to the information that even that, say, hospital that partner with you can give you information. It then also impacts your reporting, impacts your data, because there are privacy restrictions, around all of those areas, and there is an extent to which you can go. And another major one is around capacity and skill gaps. Capacity is a big one. You need to understand the data you want to collect. You need to understand the reason why you are collecting the data you are collecting. So as a sustainability desk person, for instance, for you to even coordinate data, across units, it means you know what you are looking for. You know the units in which it should be measured. Then you want to start training others, so that they are able to collect that information in a way that it is reliable for you to be able to use, to report, and even to give to management, to give to stakeholders, to make their own informed decision, to inform strategy, and all of those. So those are different challenges that organizations face. The list is not exhaustive, but I thought to highlight these key ones.
Right. Thank you, Wande, for that. It's a good list, and I mean, with my experience, I've seen this happen in different ways. I see that you mentioned the silo data challenge. There's some part of the data that is sitting in HR, part is sitting with property management, part is sitting with finance, and the sustainability person has to now find a way to get this data to report on. You mentioned areas on you mentioned on manual how some people have manualized the whole thing, and with manuals we know that there are some errors. You mentioned lack of clear direction. There's no KPI set around the data that should be collected. We don't know what we are terming as energy consumption. How do we record this, under which of the scopes, scope 1, scope 2? What really are we calling this? And then you mentioned things around the governance of the data. For example, mention who should own the data, who is responsible for collecting it, then who is supposed to provide some oversight over that. I see you also mentioning one of the biggest things we face is the capacity building through who is aware of what they are even supposed to do, who is training who, even the sustainability responsible person, what are they collecting from who, and then the person they are collecting the data from, does the person understand what they need to provide? So these are similar challenges also we face across Ghana, in Ghana as well. As I said, we are siblings, and these are some of the challenges we face as well. I think maybe what I'll just add to this is the maturity of some systems that people are already using to collect other data in their businesses. For example, maybe such systems have not been calibrated yet to track and collect ESG specific data. So that's maturity of already existing systems. And then lastly, I'll mention, maybe some people will not be happy. Some people don't set budget out, limited budget for ESG systems. So there's no budget for such systems. I think ESG is just one of the things we should track. There's euphoria around, let's just manually put some things to it. But we are saying that it goes a long way to help in keeping the data together. So closely, and at this, I'll move to Kenny. Kenny, I wanted to help us. How do manual processes, fragmented systems, and inconsistent KPI definition create reporting risk? So now we've discussed the challenges, we've talked about what is prevalent. Now I want to understand how these things hamper our reporting quality and what are the risks associated with that. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you for that question. It flows smoothly from where Yewande's contribution ended, largely because the manual process of gathering data comes up with a lot of human errors and inconsistency. This would not matter if it's in an FMCG or an oil and gas, or regardless of the sector where the individual or the organization operates in, it really wouldn't matter, because this comes up with issues or risks around human error or data inconsistency. I've also seen over time that it slows down the process of data collection. You can imagine a volume of data points needed to be collected across material topics of environment, social, and governance, and different persons that need to be accountable for them, the different durations of the year that needs to be covered, and all the months that needs to be covered. And oftentimes when this is being done manually, it really slows down the process, especially when there could have been a tool that would have automated and increased the pace of doing that. And this often leads to delayed or data reports. You see instances where sustainability reports of a previous year are probably coming up towards the end of the new year. And it's just a major challenge when a process is done manually. There's also the challenge around transparency of how the data is processed. It makes it hard to verify the data points for accuracy. So usually we've seen this happen over time, especially when it's probably done on papers and there are no systems where they are collated and different persons just send the data via different emails, different locations, and it just becomes difficult to verify or validate. There was a reference earlier to the need for assurance of sustainability report. We've seen that this sometimes proves to be challenging to organizations that use manual processes because they're unable to provide very easily the methodology for calculating, the evidences to justify how the final numbers were reached or calculated, and this becomes a major challenge for them. The other challenge and risk is the fragmented systems the manual process creates. Like Bernard and Yewande has alluded to earlier, sometimes the sustainability data point sits in different divisions within an organization. And in an instance where this is being done manually, what it means is that no one has a central view of the sustainability data points within the organization, and it becomes difficult to take strategic decisions when this is lacking. So data silos really makes it difficult to consolidate, to analyze information that can be used for strategic decision making, either retrospectively or in a futuristic approach. And this, of course, leads to inconsistent data access, and it causes significant discrepancies in reporting. And we've seen this happen over time when organizations are unable to present a central view to their data points. Another major impact of this is inconsistent KPI definitions. It makes it difficult when the process is done manually to compare ESG data across departments, locations, or regions, because of course the processes are not put or probably gathered in a comparable way. It's difficult sometimes as well to compare over time to see trend analysis, because of course what the organization probably does is to collect data as needed per time, and there's no integration or centralization of the data points to allow for a comparative analysis and all of that. The other point I would make before tying it all together is the fact that manual processes of collecting ESG data often result in ambiguous or misleading or misinterpreted reports. There are instances where sustainability reports are published with misstatements, erroneous calculations, and this often sometimes results from even the process of gathering the data, some gaps or control flaws at the point of gathering the data, especially when it is manual. And sometimes, in fact, at the point of conducting assurance for sustainability reports, organizations then discover a lot of initial misstatements they might have put together in that report. So really, the manual process of data collection poses a risk of preparing a misleading or misinterpreted report. All of this put together puts the organization at risks of misstatement, either deliberately or unintentionally. That's greenwashing. There's also the challenge of whitewashing, basically as well. So, but basically, manual data collection poses a risk of an organization publishing a report that has material flaws in its calculations, and it has a lot of consequences, as it were. It could be fines, it could be stakeholder mistrusts, investors mistrusts, and several others. And factually, some kinds of data points are difficult to measure manually. If I pick scope 3 as an example, even some scope 2 emissions, usually there's a need to leverage tools or resources to be able to harmonize data at a more central view to make it more impactful. Yeah, so that's basically the response to that. Thank you, Bernard.
All right, thank you, Kenny. I picked some 3 points from what you mentioned on how these challenges that Yewande highlighted, how they impact or how they create reporting risks. So I hear you mention late reporting cycles, and then you further explain that it can even bring about inconsistency in the reporting cycles. You're supposed to report on this time, this year you reported at this time, next year you report another time. It's all because of the challenges flowing through. I also see that you mentioned hard to verify data points. So when we have reports like that, we have their data points being difficult to be verified, and that leads to misleading reporting. Misleading reporting in the sense of it's unintentional, but you have some errors in there, And then you have some either overstatement of impact or understatement of that. And this further leads to some challenges where now credibility of reporting and then being painted as a greenwasher or a company that's greenwashing. And as you mentioned, these risks that exist. So it's imperative that these challenges be looked at and then solved from the root. Thank you very much. I have an interesting question. And this question, when I was putting together, one of the things that came to mind is we have different people we speak to, different sizes of companies. We have SMEs through to very huge cooperatives. And working closely with SMEs, you realize that their questions are, does this also matter to me? Am I the only one facing this? Or so my question to you one day, and your experience as well, is to highlight the SMEs and then the large cooperatives we work with or corporations we work for. Do they face the same data issues or their challenges are different? I'm sure maybe there's an SME on the call. He wants to hear that or she wants to hear that. So help us with that, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Bernard. So SMEs and large corporates, typically you would expect that their challenges are different, right? But they actually have common challenges, and then they have some distinct challenges that come with their sizes when it comes to ESG data. So looking at the common challenges they have, there is a bit on the lack of standardization. I spoke about having to report in line with different frameworks is a challenge that both groups mutually face because there are even industry specific standards as well. So you then have a plethora of frameworks and guidelines to report against. This is a common challenge. Another common challenge is manual processes. Typically, you would expect that large corporates, have advanced in their data management systems, and they probably have it automated. Some do, and some don't. Right? We have large corporates that still have manual processes for collecting their data. They probably believe it's working for them. The business decisions are based on different factors, but of course, they will then need to also face the challenges that come with manual management of data. Also, supply chain visibility. Everyone has their supply chain, and every business is dependent on some others. So they will then continue to face that issue of having to rely on data from another party. And that is even if that data comes, at all. There are large corporates that have a lot of SMEs in their supply chain. They depend on SMEs a lot, right? So it then means that these challenges that the SMEs face can be inherited by the large corporates as well because they rely on supply chain. But when we look closely at the SMEs, they have some specific challenges, and the first being related to limited resources. They're, expectedly, they have less amount of resources at their disposal compared to large corporates. Even when you look at access to loans, for instance, of course, your access to loan is going to, be dependent on so many factors around, your revenue, your collateral and all that, which is likely to be proportional to the size of your business. So they have limited resource constraints. So, for instance, when you talk about being able to invest in softwares, being able to invest in consultants. Some SMEs will even tell you, I don't have money for consultants, right? So those can be specific challenges to SMEs. Also, in terms of low data maturity, it is likely that the data maturity level of a large organization, is more advanced than that of a small organization. Still related to their resources again. For instance, they probably have one man attending to sustainability, attending to facility admin, and so many things, while in the larger corporates, you have, more persons attending to different things at a time. Also, in terms of heavy reliance on estimates and secondary data, smaller organizations, a lot of times they don't have that much funds, to carry out their own primary research, and they rely a lot on secondary data. Whereas large organizations are able to conduct some research by themselves and gather some information, right from the source. Capacity as well in terms of knowledge, in terms of, the resources and technology access. Those are specific SME challenges when it comes to sustainability data. But the large corporates, even the size of the business, the complexity, the scale of the business also comes with challenges because, for instance, they have multiple sites across which they collect sustainability data. That then exposes the data to variations, to error, to all of that. They have many subsidiaries sometimes. Sometimes they operate in different jurisdictions. So it then means that they need to regularize across all of these variations to ensure that when they are reporting a group information, for instance, it is actually representative of the situation, of the performance of that sustainability metric. So those dependencies, those complexities sometimes impact and this come across as challenges for larger corporates. Also, regulatory pressure. You would admit that the regulatory pressure on large corporates is expected to be more than a smaller corporate. Even for instance, when you even look at things like tax, for instance, the tax obligations of the small business is not as large as that of the larger business. Also, when you consider the ISSB standards, for instance, the adoption roadmap in Nigeria, which I believe that Ghana, has a close pattern as well. You will see that public interest entities are expected to report earlier than the SMEs, because it's expected that you have some systems, you have some resources at your disposal, and you should be able to embark on this journey earlier than SME. So regulatory pressure is more on, these larger corporates. Also, in terms of integration challenges, linking to an existing system. So they probably have systems managing their financial data, they have those managing risk, they have all of those systems already. Then having that integrated system that considers sustainability risk and opportunities, it can be a challenge as well. And sometimes they can continue to then push the advancement for sustainability data because they have a system that is working for other areas. And then supply chain depth, so they are much more, they have a much more complex supply chain compared to the small organizations. And so their data challenge in that area can also be a problem. So I'll just pause there and so that we can continue to other areas. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm happy that you mentioned that there are challenges on both ends. So for SME, you face your challenges, and then the big cooperatives who also face their challenges. And I'm happy about how you clearly showed what the challenges are. It looks like they grow as you're becoming big. You spoke about maybe some two things I'll mention, that for the SMEs, you might have a one-man stop shop doing everything. But in the big corporate, they have like a whole department running that. And with that, provide some more levels of check. And then secondary data collection. While they have the infrastructure to track data from the primary sources, SME might not have the machinery or the mechanism to do that. So these are some of the things, and I'm happy that you helped us speak through that. So we've been having a conversation on through from setting the tone through to data challenges, how that impacts reporting. I welcome one question from the audience. I'll let Kenny take the ask. Yewande takes a virtual water break. Then we will come back to that. So the question on the floor is: can a proper checklist and digitalization sustain the proper flow of data across stakeholders? I'm sure this comes from the challenges we've mentioned. So they're asking that if they have the proper checklist and then if they have digitalization, will it help sustain the flow of data across the stakeholders?
Yes, thank you for that question. It sure helps. It's an important component of an organization's sustainability data governance, as it were. It's a challenging process if an organization lacks a full view of the sustainability data points that it needs to cover. If it lacks a full view of the checklists it needs to scope in for its work. So what the checklist does, and I could call it a manual, what it does is that it identifies the universe of sustainability data an organization has scoped in, and it also identifies who is responsible for what, as well as how the data points to be collected or collated. So really, if an organization does not have a full view of the data point it needs to collect or track, it becomes difficult for them to track them accordingly. And what that process really does is to guide you to know what to do. However, the point to note is that it is not an exclusive guarantee to excellence in sustainability data management. We've had instances where an organization would invest so much in doing an inventorization of its sustainability data points, invest so much in doing a framework, a governance protocol, or a manual on the sustainability data points within the organization, and nothing still happens. So it's a good step. It's a foundational requirement, but it doesn't stop there. There needs to be several other things that would work alongside that checklist, including the culture, even the right tool. So I'll take a practical example of a data point around emissions. While you may have the checklist of everything you need to cover, who is responsible for it and how you need to do it, if, for example, you don't have the right tools or resources or even competencies to collect or analyze or interpret those data points, the checklist would just be as good as being a checklist. So I would say you need to have the checklist or the universe. However, it doesn't stop there. The culture, the tools, the resources, and all of that needs to work together to make it work. I think that should answer the question for now.
All right, thank you, Kenny. Very comprehensive response. So yes, you're saying that the checklist and the digitalization are sufficient for the flow of data across different stakeholders. However, you might want to consider some of these things will need some good or specific or deep knowledge to be able to enforce them. So he asked that it's a good start, but shouldn't end there. We should build on that to do more. So we'll move on to our next section. We spoke on one of the key challenges that's run through our discussion. We spoke on data governance, or we've spoken about governance, ownership across who should own the data, who should supervise, who should control, and other words around governance. I'll leave this open. You one day will start it, or Kenny will want to continue. The first question I'll have there is, what does good ESG data governance actually look like in practice? So we've used the word governance, but I want to break it down so somebody can take away that this is what it looks like. I'm looking at, so somebody is, as you're speaking, looking at what they have in their ESG data governance. Is this, can I call this good? What do I need to change? So basically the import of the question is, where am I and where should I get to? So this is to any of you. You one day can take a Kane, and you can also take that. Thank you.
Yeah, Kenny, please go ahead.
Okay, great. I'll just start with a few attributes that you need to look out for in assessing the quality of your data governance system. The first question you want to ask yourself is clear ownership and accountability. So when you look at the sustainability data governance landscape within your organization, can you clearly identify defined roles and responsibilities for ESG data stewardship within the organization? So for data point A, who really is responsible for it? And one thing that is interesting about sustainability data point is that it doesn't really sit with anyone. So if you look at the social component, there are several components within the social pillar that sits with different process owners. Same with the environmental and governance. But the question you are asking is that for each of these components, are they clearly defined persons responsible for these data points? Are there roles and responsibilities across the life cycle of generating these data points? The second question you want to ask yourself will be around standardized data frameworks. Do you have consistent definitions, measurement methods, or reporting standards for the ESG metrics? So if you pick an emissions indicator, for example, do you have a clearly defined framework or approach to analyzing them? That goes a long way in indicating the quality of data points you actually have. The other thing I would mention would be around decentralization of your sustainability data. A good sustainability data system needs to have a central view. And I know we've talked about technology a number of times in this presentation, but we also recognize that different organizations have different maturity levels. I may not be able to invest in very expensive sustainability data management solutions, but there still needs to be a central repository of sustainability data points across the organization, such that decision makers are able to extract or use sustainability data as required, and they have a full view of the sustainability data points within the organization. I will say one more, and perhaps allow you one day also make inclusions in this. The other bit is data quality controls. If you cannot identify the controls you've put in place to ensure the quality of your sustainability data points, then there could be a challenge with that. Do you have regular checks for accountability? Do you have regular checks for completeness or consistency to ensure reliable reporting? Those things actually need to be in place. And I hope one of the questions later on will touch on data quality controls over ESG disclosures, because this is important as it were. And this also fits smoothly into the point on regular audits and reviews. We recognize that sustainability data points will need to be validated from time to time. In fact, sometimes we recommend to internal audit functions within organizations to incorporate sustainability elements into their regular audits to ensure that they have a continuous oversight and review of the data points within the organization. This should avoid material misstatements and allows the organization correct proactively data gaps from time to time. And so these are some of the questions you probably want to ask yourself. And some more points, and perhaps I should just make that. That would be around the availability of tools to capture and integrate your sustainability data across departments, such that it will reduce manual errors. And tools can be anything. It could be technology, sometimes it could be as basic based on the maturity of the organization. It could be as basic as an Excel, a well-automated documented Excel document. It could be a simple software, but literally a good data governance structure would factor in the relevant tools and resources that ensures that the data points are sufficiently harnessed and gathered across its life cycle. And the final point would be around transparency and reporting. A good data governance view will ensure that there is a clear documentation and transparency around how data is processed and reported. That cannot be defined, and it will pose a challenge, as it were. Thank you.
You can come in and add to that.
Yes. Thank you very much. I think Kenny has actually said a lot here. What I would just add is that you can then imagine a system where all of what Kenny has mentioned is absent, right? The controls are absent, the framework that is guiding the data owners are absent, the reporting structure is absent. The internal auditing, they don't have it in their annual audit plan. So imagine all of this not being there. I'm not sure, anything within an organization can really move forward without all of, even the tone at the top, and then management buying, where all of these are not in place, then it's not even going to be prioritized by data owner, because it doesn't then demonstrate priority for the organization when it comes to sustainability. So I would say that it's a journey. You may not be able to have all of these things in place at the beginning, at the start, but it's a journey. Having all of these points at the back of your mind, and having plans on how to take them out one by one, will help to ensure that our journey, is meaningful. And maybe just to emphasize on the third party review. Third party review is always very important, whether in form of assurance or review. It's very important because within your business, you have been the one running this. You think all is well, and then you have an objective party coming to look at it, an objective party that has gone through different other systems, has seen leading practices, then comes to look at your system and then is able to say, oh, these are the improvement areas that you need to embark upon to ensure that, the integrity of your sustainability data is even much more enhanced. Things as little as even the level of reviews. You imagine that you have a system where you have somebody that inputs the data and there is no reviewer, there is no one signing off, to what level do you have comfort over that sustainability data? But in a system where you have those levels of reviews, you have the maker checker system in place, it gives you a level of comfort, and things as minute as that we may have taken for granted because this is our own day-to-day life. An external party is able to look into it and identify all of this and help us to even progress in our journey. So you cannot underestimate the role of governance, in sustainability data management. I just thought to emphasize that. Thank you.
And thank you, Wande, and Kenny for that. So that helps us on what it looks like. I'm sure we have some ticks on where we have to start changing from. So thank you on that. I'll move to the next one, and you want to ask you, or you continue to speak on that. Who should own ESG data within an organization? Should it sit with sustainability department? Should it sit with risk? Should it sit with finance? Should it sit with IT? Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Bernard. And I feel like throwing that question back to you, but I know it's not allowed, right? But I think that we have actually answered this question in the course of other questions you have asked at the beginning. We have talked about the role of different functions, in sustainability. When you have a sustainability desk, you have a head of sustainability, you have a sustainability manager. That desk is more or less a coordination point because sustainability data sits across the entire organization, from different functions to another. However, there's somebody who has an overall oversight and is guiding the different process owners, as to how they should integrate sustainability into their day-to-day operations and ultimately be able to report at the end of the day. If I take risk, for instance, for example, I think the ISSB standard has even now magnified the role of risk management, enterprise risk management function in this, because the ISSB is very critical about sustainability related risk and opportunity. It is risk and opportunity focus, and then it then means that even if enterprise risk management leaders are not sustainability experts, they're able to bring in their risk lens, and able to have that handshake with the sustainability lead, and able to help the organization to determine the critical risk to their business from sustainability point of view and what the opportunities are. Finance, for instance, if I refer you to the ISSB standard again, it says sustainability related risk and opportunities that would impact the prospect of the business. What is the prospect of the business? Financial performance, the positioning, to be able to access funds, whether from investment, from loans, from grants, all of those things. So the finance has a role because now we need to be able to quantify sustainability risk and opportunities and what their likely impact will be on the financial performance of the organization. So in that aspect, the finance function comes in, to help us to be able to achieve that integration and quantification. If I go to security as well, I'm not talking about IT security, I'm talking of security broadly. This is an area that people don't really focus on. But in corporates like this, the risk that the sustainability function, is exposed to the most can be referred to as the human rights risk. The security function is kind of empowered. They determine who goes in, goes out and all of those things. And there is that tendency to want to exert that power, without necessarily checking to see that this considers or respects the fundamental human rights of the people that they are allowing or preventing from entering premises or particular restricted areas. So some of those, and if we even look at IT security, looking at data governance, looking at cyber security metrics, all of those information come from them. So it then means that they need the right data to be able to set the strategy, to be able to integrate into what they do, to be able to report at the end of the day. If we look at HR and admin, HR, they focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, diversity, equality, and inclusion matters. They focus on training. They are also looking at grievances, that are registered by employees and perhaps external stakeholders. All of this information are what fit into the sustainability report at the end of the day. You look at HS, for instance. I think HS is quite a mature space, looking at, and HS has even not gone beyond physical safety of employees. It has even embodied welfare, psychological safety. All of those areas have emerged, and these are information that often reside with HSC and operation. You talk about procurement, you're talking about supply chain several, you're talking about scope 3 being dependent on supply chain a lot. Procurement, then are responsible for data gathering in all of these areas. They're even responsible for communicating our targets, our ambitions to this, supply chain stakeholders, such that they understand what their role is in helping us as a business to achieve our sustainability objective. There's legal and compliance. There are legal paths to sustainability. There's the anti-bribery and corruption bits, there is the privacy bits, there is enforcement, several other units, depending on the nomenclature that is being used within the organization. So everybody has a role to play, and we cannot say that one unit owns data. The units own data as it relates to their own function, and they need to understand their role. They need to understand the data they are collecting. They need to understand in which units they are collecting the data, in what form is it going to be useful for meaningful reporting. So all of these units are very relevant, and they contribute to success of in sustainability journey of organizations.
Thank you very much, Iwande. And there's a lot you've mentioned in that, and then I'm hoping that we've gotten that. I see that there's a distributed responsibility for data ownership. That's where the departments provide the data. Then the sustainability unit or department coordinates what's happening and then reports on it, because they have the map. So they are coordinating what should be gotten from the different department. And then we have other layers on how IT supports systems that promotes the success for this sustainability. And then the board's oversight level through approval and then overseeing that. So I'll at this point in time, if you want to ask a question, say anything, please speak through the Q&A chat. I'll read the question, it'll be answered. We'll be moving on to the practical steps and solutions. But before that, I'll welcome questions, maybe any comments. And we've also left the feedback form in our comment. We want to hear from you. We want to deliver more and more. If there's a topic or something you want us to share knowledge on, we will prioritize that in our upcoming, in other sessions as well. We've sent that form to you. Kindly use that. My first question will be to Kenny. If a company wants to strengthen its ESG data today, what are the first 3 practical steps you would recommend from your experience, from your learning? You want to strengthen ESG data. What are my first three practical steps to take?
Yes, thank you, Bernard. The first step really would be to conduct the maturity assessment, a sustainability or ESG data maturity assessment. This is an objective review of where the organization is in terms of its sustainability data, an objective review of what systems or advantages the organization has in terms of that journey. And this is not a review that goes to an external stakeholder or to regulators. It is for the organization's own assessment. So it oftentimes is a good starting point for you to be able to objectively understand where you are, what your major areas of strength are, and what your major challenges or constraints really are as an organization. So if you ask me, I'd say that's a first starting point. And it doesn't need to be flamboyant or excessive or complicated. It could be as basic as sitting down to review what the data points you're expected to disclose are based on your strategy and all of that, and then defining the ones you have and challenges to identifying or gathering those data points. And I started with saying a sustainability maturity assessment in terms of data is important on the assumption that you would have done your sustainability strategy and alignment, especially in terms of your materiality assessment to start with, because that in itself is a foundation to sustainability data governance. So once that has been done, you've done a materiality assessment of what information of the organization needs to track and report. You've done a maturity review of what your advantages or strengths are in terms of those data points and what your challenges are. A next step then becomes to establish a data governance framework. We've mentioned this in different forms earlier. You could say a data governance framework, you could say a sustainability data governance manual. You could say a detailed checklist that explains what the data points are, who is responsible for what, and how would they be gathered. But the point is that you need to have a documentation of the clear processes to track, report, and review the sustainability data points that you've scoped in. And this step is an important step only after the maturity assessment, because from experience, the structures and systems in different organizations differ. The tools and resources used in different organizations really differ. So it is only when you understand what the peculiarities of the organizations are that you are able to develop a tailored sustainability data governance framework that reflects those peculiarities. The framework for company A may not work for company B or C or D, so it has to be tailored to your own specific context. The third point I would mention would be to invest in integrated sustainability data platforms. It's a level of maturity organizations you aim to get to. If we reflect this in terms of financial management, we note that a number of organizations have different kinds of tools, accounting softwares that they use. You'd rarely see an organization that exclusively relies on Excel for tracking their financial performance and all of that. So, and that's a level of maturity that financial reporting has gotten to. So it's important for organizations to also attach a similar level of importance to sustainability data and invest in relevant platforms that matches the maturity of the company. There are some sustainability management tools that works for organizations that are very large, operating in different locations. So you don't need that if you're an SME or a small company. There are different tools that really works for different company sectors, different company sizes, and it just needs to be tailored to reflect that. The final component would be to implement a continuous data verification system and auditing, which we mentioned earlier. So while you start the journey, while you've invested in the tools, you have a governance framework. It's important for an organization to recognize that it doesn't stop there, because the organization in itself is evolving from time to time, and it's important to institute or embed systems to continuously monitor and update the data governance approaches from time to time. So I think I would end this by saying that these four steps, the maturity assessment, data governance, the data tools and resources, as well as monitoring and evaluation, are all built on the foundation of a sustainability strategy and materiality assessment. And that in itself is a point zero, the starting point. If an organization has not defined what its sustainability strategies are, what its material issues are based on the lens of its stakeholders, it's difficult for the organization to correctly scope in the data point it wants to collect or the data points it needs to report on from time to time. So that in itself forms that critical starting point for organizations. And I would use the opportunity as well to correct a misconception we've seen several players in the sectors have. We've seen instances where organizations feel that when we invest in the sustainability data management tools and platforms, we are able to solve all our data management issues. But that's wrong, because when you have a sustainability data management platform or technology without clearly defined processes or data points to track, the tool would only amplify inefficiencies. So the tool is important, but it's equally important to start off with defining the strategic direction and material topics for an organization as it begins the journey to implementing sustainability data management. Thank you.
Okay, maybe just to buttress your point, Kenny, and also to just talk to a simple roadmap that organizations can use to move from ad hoc ESG reporting to structured and reliable disclosures. So I've spoken about the standards and how there are many of them. So then there's need to then pick which standards are relevant to businesses. So in Ghana and Nigeria, for instance, it is clear that the ISSB standards, the IFRS S1 and S2, they are required, and then one or two other requirements that you may have as a result of the nature of your business. Maybe there's the sector specific requirements you need to meet. There is an obligation you have committed to that you need to meet. There's something required from the group company that you need to meet, considering all of those and trying to, as much as possible, minimize the number of standards you want to report in line with as far as practicable, and then conducting a gap assessment. Kenny spoke about being able to compare where you are, to where those standards require you to be. So you have selected your standards, and these standards come with requirements. So it's then important for an organization to assess their current sustainability performance and compare it to where the standard requires them to be, and be able to identify what are the gaps and what are the steps that will be taken in closing out. So one of the steps may then be materiality assessment, which then helps you to understand what sustainability topics are important to your business. I think I've seen someone mention, or I think when Bernard was reading out the question, someone asking, how do you report all data? And this is where sustainability materiality assessment comes in. Materiality assessment is a systematic way that helps you to determine what is critical to you per time when it comes to sustainability, and so that you can focus your resources, you can channel your resources on those areas, and you're able to measure your performance and ultimately report in those areas. So when you have conducted your gap assessment and you have carried out your materiality assessment, you then understand what you want to track. So what you want to track, you understand where you are already, you then are able to set targets, to able to say, this is where I'm going and this is how I'm going to track it. And one of those ways of tracking is, the tool that Kehinde has mentioned earlier. And then assigning responsibility. Assigning responsibility is very important. It helps to hold people accountable. When no one is accountable for sustainability data, it is not likely that that data is going to be of high quality, because accountability means that no one, I don't have to report to somebody on the progress. I don't have to report to somebody on the performance last month vis-a-vis this month. Nobody is reviewing the report I am producing. Nobody is verifying it. Internal audit does not have my process in their annual plan, to be reviewed. So assigning responsibility is very important. So when people are held accountable for certain sustainability data, then they don't leave it to the sustainability focal person. They take it very seriously. and then coordinating or centralizing the data in one place, such that there's a central repository, and one is able to see performance per time, via dashboards and what have you. And then implementing quality control is very important, such that if I input any data, somebody is able to determine who has input that data, at what time was it input, so that there is no controversy around, oh, I don't know who said our critical incidents for this year is 0 when it is not 0. So you are able to identify a name to someone who has put that data there. You're able to identify a name to the person that has reviewed. You're able to identify the person that signed off on the data. So all of those controls help. And also then continuous monitoring and evaluation, continuous improvement is very important. I think I had mentioned that sustainability is a journey, is not a destination. So we continue to evolve, and then we continue to see how we can improve from where we are at the moment. So I think all of this, this is a simple roadmap that an organization can adopt to improve their sustainability journey and to improve their reporting journey over time, such that they get comfortable over the reports that they have released, and they can go to sleep because they know that all the controls have been in place and have been implemented, and they can be sure of the quality that is being put out there.
All right, thank you, Wande. Thank you, Kenny. We've seen clearly where to start from. We've seen a good roadmap that has been given to us, and that's great. I'll give the last question under this, and then we'll take questions from our audience. I'm sure Gaston will be ready to speak now. We'll take questions from our audience, and then I'll come back for your closing reflections. So, Kenny, can you help us with how can automation and technology platforms help? And what should smaller organizations do if they cannot invest in complex systems? So this is a double tier one. I know you spent time mentioning what automation does as to solve some challenges. Maybe you might want to spend some time on what small organizations can do if they cannot invest in complex systems at the moment. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And I think I also touched on this slightly earlier. The first thing to note for organization is, and I would like to talk about how even the automation helps organizations to improve their data reporting. The first point is really around the streamlined data collection processes, the real-time data tracking, the centralized data storage, the improved data quality, and integration across systems. Those things are important components of sustainability data management. In fact, I've seen automated tools that shows at a glance a company's comparative performance year on year, even across departments, and a number of those kind of stuffs. Sometimes it even shows performance against target. So these are very important positive components of automating the process. Sometimes board members or senior management teams that don't have enough time to drill down into some of the data points are just able to see the dashboards, and it gives them an idea of what it is. But to go to your question on the second part of the question on what smaller businesses can do, I think it's to start off with understanding what can work, what can be used at this point, and because there are different tools available. If, for example, I talk about something as basic as a shared drive, it could be a Google or Microsoft shared drive, where the organization has clearly allotted folders for different data points or different data owners, or a master sheet that has access to several other process owners, and these data points are being collected and collated from time to time. It could be as simple or as basic as that. But one thing is sure, that to be able to start with that level, the organization needs to have that manual, needs to have that framework as a starting point, regardless of how big or small the organization is. They need to say, for the size of our business, even if we are just 10 in this company, what are the data points we need to track? Who is responsible for it? and what tool is at our disposal at this point to use in collating and managing these data points. And like I said, it could be a shared folder, it could be a drive, something that just is practicable, reliable, and easily accessible for these organizations to use from time to time in that process. So I think it's a valid question, and I've heard this feedback a number of times when SMEs say we don't have a lot of money to invest in data management tools, but it's to look at the term tool as what it is. A tool is a tool. A tool is not an expensive tool or a cheap tool. A tool is a tool. So review the landscape of tools available for the organization and determine the ones that work for them. Of course, starting with the need to have the checklist and framework in the first instance.
Thank you, Kenny, for that. And I'm happy that none of us left behind. So be it SME, be it MSME, be it a big cooperative, there's space and there's room for everyone. I'm happy that the ESG conversations, as we keep having them, shows that as is everything we do and how we do everything is also for everyone. So there are solutions that best fit your current state as a company. Thank you once again, Kenny, for that. At this point, I welcome questions from our audience via the chat box, via your hand raised. Augustine, okay, Kwe, I hope I mentioned that. If I didn't do that, forgive me. I think I have to eat more ogbono soup to be able to mention those. I hope I have that name too right. And so, Augustine, please unmute yourself and then speak. I've given you, please unmute and then ask your question, please. All right, if not, I'll try and then I'll say one of the things what I've picked out from this is, so if assuming I'm starting out a business, I'm new on ESG, I've seen how data plays a crucial role, and starting out a business, I'll need people I'm working with. There's a community that my work will impact, and I'll need investors. The credibility of my data counts. The systems I put in place to move me from a manual to semi-system to full system is very necessary. And one of the critical things I'm taking away from this is if I don't track or don't take my data well, it will come out in my reporting, and that would affect my credibility and impact me on regulatory problems and my reputation. And one of the ways to set this is to have good data governance, and good data governance comes with setting what my priorities are. And I like something you and they mentioned, that you can't start the general reporting on any and everything. You have to do what we call a materiality assessment to understand what topics are of priority, both financial and impact-wise to my company. And Kenny added up to say that to know where you even are or to start your journey, do what we determine a maturity assessment, understand what your current gaps are. So as a company, what I'm taking away from is I need to know where really I am. And there's been conversation on what looks like good data governance, that I have a checklist to check that, and then other areas as well. So thank you for that. I will move on now to the closing reflections from our speakers. So anyone take turns. I think Kenny just spoke. I'm sure he's having a virtual water break. And I'll move to you and they help us with your closing reflections, what we can take away from this. And then Kenny will come in and I'll come back. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very, very much. So I would say ultimately, sustainability data is very instrumental to our growth as an organization, both from sustainability lens and overall corporate lens perspective. I would say that because of this, it is important that we let the various data owners, the various sustainability process owners within the organization understand the importance of the data they are collecting. What are they collecting and why are they collecting it? To what use are we putting this information? When that clarity is there, the stress is less because they are motivated, they are purpose driven, compared to they say we should collect data on gender and we are collecting, but I don't understand what this means for my organization. When people are purpose driven in what they do, success is likely to be sure, because there is a common purpose and we are all driving to achieve it. So a lot of times, some of these things are not company So we should let them know, and we'll see how much we'll progress faster in our journey. I think that's a key message I would like to pass across. Thank you.
Please come with your closing reflection. Okay, thank you, Yewande. Sorry, thank you very much. And for that reflection, will stay with us. Kenny, please come in with yours. And
okay, great. And I think for me, I would want us to note that ESG data governance is really the foundation of credibility and trust in your ESG reporting, because the quality of your data directly influences the credibility of your ESG story. You know, the quality of your data directly influences the credibility of your ESG story. As a result, and I think this point has resonated clearly across board for everyone, it's important to start with a clear, simple framework for data collection and reporting, because this would avoid things around over complications, material misstatement, and a number of that. So we need to be deliberate about starting with that clear, simple framework for data collection and reporting. Also noting that it's a journey. You graduate from time to time. The objective is not to get 100% from day one. The objective is to get the journey started. Start from 1, you move to 2 until you get to 100%, but just get the journey started, because sustainability data is key to the success of your sustainability endeavors. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kenny. Thank you, Wande. I put some things down as well that I see. I like something you said, that ESG, and I put it this way, that ESG is not necessarily a project that's just done and ended. It's a journey. And every journey needs a reliable compass. And today we've learned that our compass is the ESG data that we are taking away. And organizations that will lead in our future are those who measure what matters today. And maybe I'll leave you with this. Today's discussion has come to make us understand that sustainability is just not about intentions. It's about evidence. And our evidence is in the data we collect. So these are some my reflections from our conversation that I also leave with us. So I'll say thank you very much to all of us, to everyone who's joined, and people who've joined right through from the beginning of the year to now. I mean, I have mixed feelings on that. It's the last for the year, but definitely you'll see us again do this. Thank you for joining through, and we've been happy. I've been happy to moderate this throughout the entire session, the entire 4 sessions. I just think a question has come through. Okay, so from Augustine, I think he wanted to say something. I'll use this time to read that. He's saying, we couldn't hear him. Oh, no problem on that. Thank you for typing this. So Yewande gave a detailed explanation about how sustainability cuts across different units. And that triggered a memory for me. I once had a conversation with someone in the finance team who argued that sustainability was not part of his role. He felt his organization kept bothering him and colleagues in other non-sustainability departments about sustainability issues. I believe this kind of misconception is common and contributes to the difficulty organizations face in tracking and gathering sustainability data. How can organizations change this mindset? I thank you for this very comprehensive, Augustine. I appreciate your thoughts. And I'm happy that these are some of the things right from the beginning. My colleague Kenny gave us a 3-point letter. It was PTP. And the first thing was people-related challenges. That's either the absence of people or the absence of people with the right skills. And then this is clearly an information or knowledge gap. So the way to bridge this is board through key management being deliberate about ESG awareness creation, and then deliberate capacity building in department-specific data tracking areas to help them. So this is what I've gathered from what we had today to answer this. I welcome maybe anyone. One day, can they want to add to that? If you want to say something shortly on that, that's fine.
So I would also just like to add that the conversation we've been having around clearly defining roles and responsibilities would also help in this context. So when from the onset, the universe of sustainability data point has been defined, and the role every function plays in providing that data has been defined. So it becomes clear about the relevance of what you are asking him or her regarding sustainability. So you are not asking a question out of the scope of what has been defined or codified. You're asking something based on the framework that has been defined ab initio. So I think this challenge also happens sometimes because there has been no clearly defined framework or guidance or governance approach to sustainability data points.
Thank you, Kenny. And I want to say thank you to UKGCC for putting this together. UKGCC is a leading member-based trade association dedicated to strengthening bilateral trade and investment between UK and then Ghana. So it serves as a trusted bridge for businesses seeking market access, partnership opportunities, and deeper commercial engagement. So UKGCC, through their strides, create fora for discourse like this to educate businesses. And KPMG, they've collaborated with KPMG to provide ESG discussion series for close to 3 years now. We thank you again, UKGCC, for putting this together. And my next appreciation goes to the team at UKGCC first, your leadership through everyone. And then to our speakers that have helped us this year, Bernard Osuansa, Jose Osuansa, Jose Asenso Enchi, Yewande, and Kehinde. Next time we'll see a board of more ladies that I promise to do. So thank you very much for being with us through the year. We are grateful. And please, we'll love to hear from you. Your feedback helps us select topics and even how to tweak the slides. We are grateful for you spending your time with us throughout the year and this time. I think it's only right I'll say happy holidays in advance and then a sustainability-led Merry Christmas to everyone and then a wonderful new year ahead. Thank you once again for your time. Thank you. Have a wonderful rest of the week and day. Bye.